Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you? Well, would you like to know where you'd be without us, the old US of A, to protect you? I'll tell you. The smallest fucking province in the Russian Empire. That's what. So don't call me stupid, lady. Just thank me.
Well, thank you for popping in and protecting us.
If it wasn't for us, you'd all be speaking German. Singing Deutschland, Deutschland.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
I think Tyler is amazing.
And I'm a fan of this show. I've watched several episodes.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. You stink, Tyler.
Never promise crazy a baby.
Oh, I like that. That's a cool idea.
Are either of you homosexuals?
I go both ways. What do you think?
You mean like flaming or?
No, we're not homosexual, but we are willing to learn.
But I do wonder, for others, in other cases, whether libertarianism today is just an excuse for many on the right to act selfishly.
Look at me. And then some fat asses in Washington started having opinions. The Olympic Committee started having opinions. You bitch, I know you. You started writing your opinions.
And it just makes me wonder, you're dead, bitch. You know, why are you doing this to this poor guy?
I don't care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you. That was...
Oh boy, look who's back. We're here. We're going. I think we're pretty much going at we've got some people in the chat. This is a bot. Hello, fellow Rumbler. Hope you're having a great day and even better weekend. Have fun. Okay. Smile and be happy says, all right, let's get this debate critique show started. This is Tyler Yonke. Welcome, everybody. Scott is here. Who watched the debate? Lost. Everyone who watched the debate lost. I was out last week. We had, let me just give you, people are like, get to the show right away. Well, let me make sure this is working here. Oh, it's not working. Okay. I'm going to work this thing over. People are like, hey, let's make sure that, let's get right to this shit right away. And I'm like, maybe not. Maybe it's fine to talk about. I went on a family vacation last week, and with the I think this is. Let's hang on. We're doing a few things. Okay, there we go. We got to have all the cameras working here. There's behind the scenes. There we go. I went to Southern California last week. We had a niece's wedding, and with that, the family. We just took some extra time. And we went to the beach. We stayed right out on the beach. It was literally a block. It was right there. We can see the beach from our house. It was pretty sweet. I mean, like there was a row of houses, and there was us, and there was the beach. It was pretty sweet. And you're like, oh, it was Newport Beach. So it was great. My friend lives down there. We got to hang out. We had a great time. So I didn't do a show last week because we took 3 dogs, by the way. We have 4 dogs. One's a rescue. I mean, they're all rescues, but one just recently my wife had got. But we took the 3 dogs down there, and it was a bit of a pain. No edge. Us more, Daddy Tyler. No. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we're going to get right into this. Look, I had shows planned. I had already things I was going to do. And then my friend, good friend, a high school friend of mine, sent me a message yesterday, and he's like, Douglas Murray is a complete douchebag. And I'm like, okay, this is odd and and I wasn't on Twitter or whatever. And then I get on Twitter later, and I see that Dave Smith and Douglas Murray, and it was just, let's say, we didn't do this. Let's do this.
Top Lobster Productions.
Yeah, King of the Dweebs. There you go. So there he is. And I didn't. Okay, so these guys had a debate. I didn't even realize that, and so I checked it out yesterday, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating for a few reasons. And one of the guys, I think his name is Jacob, or I'm sure he's he follows Toad, he follows the Tower Gang and all that, and he posted in there. He's like, should I watch this debate? And my answer to him was, it's just going to further solidify your own beliefs, right? Which is the people that love Douglas Murray or they're Zionists, as an example, they're going to think that he did great. And then the people that love Dave Smith or that side, they're going to think that Dave's crushed him. My question was, and we'll get it. I'm going to play a bunch of these clips, by the way. Okay, in no specific order. I'm just going to, I've just bookmarked them from Twitter, and I'm just going to start working my way through them. What's interesting, though, is if you look at all of them, which is, okay, part of the problem, and we're going to go through here, which is Dave Smith is not an expert. He's a comedian, and that was really emphasized by Douglas Murray a lot. But Douglas Murray is just a piece of shit. Who is he? Right? So who are anybody? This is what I've told my kids over and over, which is you used to always have to get a degree. And now you can be an expert in something by doing a lot. I've done my floors. I built stuff. I've done renovations in our house simply, and I'm not an expert, but simply from watching YouTube videos. You can learn all kinds of things and you can become good. You know, they have this in law, which is becoming not necessarily an expert, but becoming proficient in a certain portion of the law. Some of that just happens to be like getting yourself up to speed, learning about it, practicing it perhaps. So what is this definition of an expert? And it's this fallacy of what is an expert? And it's a very annoying. Okay, so you can become an expert in all kinds of things. Now, I've mentioned this before where my son, he's a nurse. He's, got a great job now. He's doing that. And it's like, okay, it is difficult to just become an expert as a nurse and qualified by watching YouTube videos and maybe putting catheters in people at a truck stop. That's just difficult. So maybe you have to go to school for that. Okay. So there are situations where you perhaps have to do that. So there you go. Perfectly fine. Now, I am more inclined to believe Dave, and I've had problems with Douglas Murray to begin with. So this to me was fascinating. And then when you break down a lot of things like Douglas Murray as an example, he's a British dude. So, this is why this intro was important.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you? Well, would you like to know where you'd be without us, the old US of A, to protect you? I'll tell you. The smallest fucking province in the Russian Empire. That's what...
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. So you could be... look, and Scott says here, a custody battle made me more of an expert than the lawyer I had. Perhaps. Now, I'm pretty good at this stuff. I deal with custody stuff all the time. So, I've had a client. I had a client recently that was sending me all kinds of chat GPT stuff. He'd put it in there and then he'd send it to me. And it was just like, just over the top information. I'm like, okay, this doesn't really work with your situation. Great. So you got the legal aspect of what it is, but that doesn't necessarily pertain to everything. So yes, you can become, and I've seen this before, people, this is what happens with law. Everyone wants to know, what do you win all the time? Because especially in criminal cases or what, maybe it's civil stuff. They're like, I always win for my client. Okay, family law is a different animal, and by that I mean, which is, you can't always. Sometimes you have a client, you just have the facts are not on your side. Maybe your client is a piece of shit, or maybe the other side is a piece of shit. But let's say it's with me, and I've got opposing party, and they don't even have an attorney, but they have the facts. And they have your client dead to rights. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? I've lost to those people simply because what are you going to do? Okay, it's not so much about like being Perry Mason all the time. So, these aren't jury trials. These are bench trials, at least here in California. So it's what it is. So Scott saying that's exactly the situation you can have here. Douglas is a neocon. Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, and Douglas is. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into some of this stuff here. And we're just going to walk through some of these clips, and I hope you enjoy them. I've just got a bunch of them here. Maybe we'll start here with this loser. This guy is unbelievable. This is Misfit Patriot, okay? And I don't even know what he's saying here on this one. What the fuck is he talking about? But he says here, hey, comic Dave Smith, I fixed your shitty analogy and false equivalency. I doubt it. According to your shit logic, any counterterrorism event throughout history is murder, but the actions of Hamas are self-defense because the war didn't start on October 7th. For the record, in my analogy, I wouldn't give a fuck who was in that apartment building. I would just John Wick the fuck out of anyone who wasn't a hostage, but the IDF apparently values human life more than I do. Okay, and he presumably, allegedly beat up an old lady for maybe saying the same shit to him. But let's see what this fucker has to say.
I'm about to play you a clip from the Dave Smith-Douglas Murray debate on Joe Rogan. And Dave Smith is about to use the biggest gaslighting and false equivalency tactic. Anna Kasprin used this same analogy to try to create this idea that if somebody comes over to your house and kills your family, you're not allowed to go and just kill everybody in the neighborhood. And after I play the clip, I'm going to tell you what the real equivalency is. So pay attention.
First of all, Dave's correct on this. And I've had DMs with Dave specifically about this. I've kind of like, back when he was first doing this with Austin Peterson, he and I were messaging. I'm giving you some insight. For some reason, I think he's gotten too big. He doesn't respond to my texting or my DMs anymore. Perfectly fine. But I did relate to this because I was telling him exactly what the situation was. This was my analogy, which is, look, you don't have, if there's a hostage at a school, we've seen this multiple times on whatever television show you want. There's a hostage situation. Then there's the guy that wants to come in there and just clean everybody out. And the cooler heads prevail, and you don't do that because you can't just wipe out an entire neighborhood. What needs to be discussed here? What needs to be discussed with this? Because I saw people trying to defend Douglas Murray on this as well, which is we are not and they're like, look, this is situations of war, and with war it's much different. Okay, but who is Israel declaring war against? Right? What country are they declaring war? Gaza? Is that a country now? What's on the passport of Gazans? These are people under the control of Israel. I mean, it blows me away that we have to keep talking about this, but when people want to discuss this situation and they want to discuss it as some sort of war between nations, you are not talking about war between nations. You're talking about people who are held captive, in a sense, by the Israelis in a place, Gaza, the West Bank, whatever. They don't have a nation of themselves. They don't have their own security for whatever. They're trying to make it in there. So the proper analogy would be like a reservation with our Native Americans, or a prison where you've got your own structure of whatever it is going on there. Okay, let's listen to. By the way, the best comment on this I've seen is Louis G. Gomez, Dave Smith's buddy, who doesn't deal in politics. He continues to respond and make comments to Misfit Patriot. But anyway, let's keep going.
Right, let's say somebody broke onto your property and killed some of your family members, and you want to go kill this guy. If he goes back to his apartment building, and you know that there's women and children in that apartment building, and so your move is to blow up the building, what you would be charged with is murder in the first degree.
Yes.
Okay, so what Dave Smith is saying is,
we know what he's saying.
If somebody, Hamas, goes into Israel on October 7th, rapes, murders, sets on fire, kills them.
And by the way, I'm going to start pushing back on a lot of this because, Douglas Murray does this too, which is what are and there you've got to, and I'm going to just push back here, which is the initial strike on October 7th. Not a good situation. Not a good situation. People died. But the Israelis and the neocons and the Zionists, they then say burning babies. They then say multiple rapes. And none of that has been proven. Matter of fact, it's been disproven over and over again. But as long as you say it, instead of just saying these fuckers got killed, which is bad enough, now you're going to say, oh, they skull fucked them, right? Because now we're really upset about skull fucking.
A bunch of women and children, takes 250 hostages, and Israel fights back. That's murder. No. Let's paint an actual analogy in what's really going on using your metrics. Okay, so Hamas is somebody, right, who breaks onto my property. Hamas comes and breaks into my property. They kill some of my family members, and then they take some of my family members back to this apartment building. Okay, They hide the hostages in the apartment building, and then...
Dude, is he even able to follow this? This guy is about as brain dead as
they say, I'll be back, by the way, to do this again.
Okay, we didn't get that indication from Hamas, so you're already adding in details to your
Over
story.
and over again until your entire bloodline is wiped off the face of the
Okay, we didn't get that either.
earth. Then they get rockets and they start firing at my property from that apartment.
By the way, it should be noted here that in his scenario, if you want to do this all correctly, when they came and they destroyed some of his family, he also destroyed some of his family with rockets at his own fucking house. Okay? We're going to be plain and simple here with the truth.
Building. So what I would do, and this is the IDF, by the way, right? I just start going, hey guys, I'm going to bomb the apartment building because these cunts keep on firing rockets at me and threatening my fucking life. Get the...
Is he driving? Can you imagine you're next to this guy in the car and he's like talking to his phone and he's doing this kind of yelling and he's got his hand up here.
Fuck out of the apartment building.
By the way, it's not just the apartment building. Now it's the neighborhood. Now it's the city. Okay? It's the city.
If you're not...
And I'm not a Hamas fan. I'm just telling you, I'm sick of this stuff. Okay? I'm sick of all of it. And people are like... And by the way, by the way, go fucking link, like this show, subscribe to it. I lost like 10 subscribers this last week. I don't know what the fuck's going on, but you guys need to step it up, okay? You need to share this here. Let's just check in with the chat and see what's going on here. Miss Patriot speaks as if he just sucked a bunch of dicks. Yeah, okay, there he is. He is a volunteer rabbi. Okay, so obviously he did suck one. No surprise. Mr. Fister, oh my God, hi Tyler, hi Red Ensign. Thank you for coming into the chat there.
Not the dickhead
JC.
I'm trying to kill.
I can't believe I'm
and
watching this.
then you have to sort of target each apartment because you don't know where the fucking bad guy is.
Yes.
But you also need to try to figure out where the fucking family member hostage is. So you go, okay, I'm gonna bomb apartment 234 tomorrow.
But why are you bombing your family? This guy, this is so stupid. This is easy, right? Which is, there's hostages. So when there's hostages in there, you obviously, if it's my wife, Dave made this point in the debate last night, which is, look, some of the most outspoken people against some of the bombing right now are family members and formerly detained or kidnapped people. Why? Because they're like, that's my wife in there. Please stop bombing the entire Gaza because I want my wife back. I don't care that you're trying to do a retribution bombing campaign. I would like my wife back, okay? Or my daughter, or my husband, whomever that was taken. This motherfucker here is saying, okay, it's ridiculous to not just bomb the thing, even though my wife's in there. And now this guy married, that's... This would have to be some sort of mail order bride situation or mail order husband. I'm sorry, I don't want to be discriminatory to the homos, David Douglas Murray and Miss Patriot, but Mr. Fister, fine. So your husband is out there. Why are you just willy-nilly bombing the fuck out of this region? This doesn't make any sense.
And then they do it over and over and over again
until
the only place that the bad guy and the hostages theoretically would...
In his scenario, it's his wife, it's his kids, it's his family that were taken. So remember that. He's now saying, why would I not just bomb the fuck out of them?
Is the fucking apartment that they could now go into with a ground assault and hopefully get my fucking family back. That's what's happening, you dumb fucking retard.
Okay, so let's not watch that again. That's... I'm not too fond of him. So, okay, let's keep going here. That was his one. This is, and by the way, I don't have these in any order because I went out with my wife. We got some drinks and whatnot. This is Dave Smith on the, if you've watched this show.
I'm about to play you a clip
wait,
from the
why
Dave.
Does this keep going? Fuck you, Mr. Patriot. Okay.
I'm Jewish and of German descent, so I'm not against the argument that it was the Nazis had to be defeated and that was the most important thing, but there still is just the basic facts that it was a it almost couldn't have gone worse. It was like just a nightmare for civilization. And if people want to look back at that and go, man, was there any other way this could have been handled? Was there any other way? Were there blunders that were made here? Now, personally, what I feel much more comfortable arguing would be that I try to blame everything I can on Woodrow Wilson as much as I can, because also he created the income tax and the Federal Reserve and did so much to damage my country. But I think American entry into World War I was really a disaster. And imposing the Treaty of Versailles on Germany.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Woodrow Wilson. That's okay with Mr. By the way, he starts the show off.
And he was a disaster. I also think that's kind of fairly mainstream history. Like, that's not a particularly controversial view, that, like, imposing the Treaty of Versailles on Germany ended up in disaster.
Well, no, except that, as Martin Amis said, the only way to not get to the Treaty of Versailles would be for Germany to win World War I. But yeah.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the Nazis winning the war.
Sure.
We're talking about, listen, I think that...
But secondly, sorry, I just have to address that fundamental. You say the outcome of World War II and everything that happened in it was the worst thing that's ever happened, and the worst thing imaginable, worst possible outcome, you said.
No. Just about.
You said worst possible outcome. Let me give you a much worse possible outcome. Hitler wins.
Right, okay, sure.
So it's not the worst possible outcome.
I mean,
that's true.
Listen, but okay, Hitler, yes, okay, I'm not saying you can't dream up a worse outcome. I'm saying what you
That's not dreaming up. That's just what my country, Earth, and others went
through.
But
what did end up happening was 60 million people died, including the Holocaust, and then Joseph Stalin takes half of Europe. So, okay, fine. I'll correct that. There is a worse outcome.
Right.
But that's not a great one.
No, nobody said it was. This is like, there's a very weird argument that you now hear about this.
Okay, it's interesting that he's like, well, nobody's saying that. This show, this debate here was jam-packed with straw man arguments from Douglas Murray. Now, his accent is English, right? And I think Glenn Greenwald, I listened to a thing this morning, and he's like, there was like some poll where there was like some percentage, like if Americans hear someone with an English accent, they immediately think like, give 20%, I think it's, for however this poll thing was taken, 20% more validity to their argument, where you hear a Southern accent and you subtract like 20%. Come on, okay, I get it, right? It's like the dumb accent, the smart accent, but just because he has an accent doesn't mean he's a smart person. But he did so many straw man arguments. It was rough to watch. Look, take you back a few weeks ago. I talked about Joe Neerman, Good Logic, doing a debate with a guy on Tim Pool, and it was sad. Okay, and then Joe Neerman goes on there and he tries to brag about it. He does a whole stream about it, and it just blows my mind. I'm like, you fucking sucked on this whole thing. Partly because you're just so wrapped up into your own identity, right? And it's identity politics. Our friend Kurt on civil law goes there and he's doing a breakdown, and he literally told Joe Neerman in the chat, Joe, I don't know what the fuck you were thinking. What's up your ass on this? Your head's up your ass with your analysis, which I thought was fantastic. Okay, there was a lot of, and part of that, and what I'm bringing that one about is, here's the main topic, right? You have this little circle of what this topic is about, and they keep just shooting everywhere else. They can't stay focused. That's what you saw a lot of this one with the Douglas Murray, which is, I'm going to obfuscate. I'm going to show little shiny ball over here. I'm going to make you think. And by the way, I would just say here, if you think Dave Smith, neither one of these guys are idiots, okay? There was things they were both bringing up that I had no clue about, okay? I'm just like, I don't know that, okay? So Douglas Murray would bring up some obscure historical reference, and I think in a way to try to get Dave like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Dave not only references it, he brings up facts about that Douglas Murray never, ever once contradicted. The biggest thing that Douglas Murray would do is like, I don't agree with your analysis. I don't agree with the way your contention with this, but he never said your facts are completely wrong. Well, he may have tried that, but I didn't see them, and I didn't see a good analysis of that. So anyway, it was good to go. Let's keep going here. We got Misfit Patriot. This is a bit longer. I don't think I could play this whole segment here, but let's start with that.
Against the people.
This is by the way, this is the most fascinating one, because I think Dave, and by the way, let's check in with the chat, see what's going on here. Mr. Pfister just wants his dildos. True. Mr. Pfister just wants his dildos. I'm not against the homos either, but should they have any kind of political voice or access to the internet? Northside, solid comment there. What's up, everybody? Okay, let's get back to the issue at hand here. This to me was most fascinating because it really talked about this woke left stuff. It's Konstantin Kisin, Joel Berry, all these guys from the Babylon Bee. They're just in constant nonsense about this kind of stuff, and their identity politics is ruling the day. And somehow they want to push back on this. Dave gets this Mr. Douglas Murray kind of caught in this situation. Let's play a little bit.
It was 2011, yeah. There was a belief. Everybody believed it. He had started his son, if you remember, Saif Gaddafi, formerly of the London School of Economics, showing that we can produce the best. Saif Gaddafi stood up and said, "We will fight to the last bullet," and so on. And everybody believed them. And the desire to intervene was caused in an attempt to not to. People did not want the resources of Libya. Nobody wanted Libya to fall apart or anything like that. No. They did it because there was a genuine belief in what was called at the time.
Okay, so they walked through the Libya stuff, right? They try to get an analysis of like, why did Libya fall, right? Why did you get Gaddafi out of there? And I thought there was a good exchange because Douglas Murray seems to be, to some extent, kind of like, I don't understand why this would happen. Why was that the case? And Dave pushes back and says, well, Israel doesn't want, it's very good, right? But let's get to the little bit more. It's Dave then starts walking through, talking about General Clark and his reference to Wolf.
The general said that he first saw the plans from him, that he had brought this to the National Security Advisor, and it had basically been like, we'll look at this after the election, and that then it was resurrected later by Richard Pearl, and that these guys were producing, again, not me saying this is 4-star General Wesley Clark. He said in a study paid for by the Israelis, and yeah, you can laugh at this all you want to, Douglas, but you can go read the clean break memo for yourself. This was the neoconservative strategy, along with their counterpart, the Likud in Israel, that they wanted to...
Because Doug, what's his name? Wolf... Let's go back here just a little bit. He says his name. Okay, now we're gotta. Oh boy. Okay. And it's circling around. Okay, so let me refresh this and see if we can get. Boy, oh boy. Okay, here we go. We're back in business. Okay, let's see if this is it.
List of 7 countries. It was Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, I believe Somalia, Sudan, and Iran, I believe.
Why would America want to do any of those things? Who wants to do it?
Well, what he said is that essentially these plans, he said later okay, so Iraq was, he had brought this to the National Security Advisor, and it had basically been like, we'll look at this after the election, and that then it was resurrected later by Richard Pearl, and that these guys were producing... Again, not me saying this is 4-star General Wesley Clark. He said in a study paid for by the Israelis. And yeah, you can laugh at this all you want to, Douglas, but you can go read the clean break memo for yourself. This was the neoconservative strategy, along with their counterpart, the Likud in Israel, that they wanted to remake the region in a way, and I'm sure by their own justification, they believed that democracy would sweep the region and it would be better off for them. Nonetheless, they pursued this path that has ended in nothing but disaster. And I don't think that to say that in 2011 it was like a purely humanitarian mission to go overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, I do not think is right.
Well, first of all, before I get to the substance of it, why would they want the current situation in Libya?
Huh?
Why would they want the current situation in Libya?
Well, because they wanted Gaddafi out.
Why?
Well, okay, if you read the clean break memo...
By the way, I don't take Douglas Murray at all in good faith here. That is not a question as to... I don't actually know. He is trying to set Dave up that Dave doesn't know. And then Dave says, what? I don't really understand. You know, we're kind of all dealing with... We all know what this situation is. And then Douglas Murray pushes him. So then Dave's like, okay, fine. Let's talk about the clean break memo. And he goes deep on it.
Their argument essentially is that you wanted to have regime change against the hostile...
And by the way, this is what's so frustrating with people that I don't think a lot of them that are commenting here, you know, your Will Chamberlains. I mean, he's just a complete buffoon. By the way, he's a complete buffoon. I don't know if you know who he is. It's just your typical right-wing chud. He had a debate with Scott Horton on Tim Pool several like last year about the Israel stuff. horrible, right? He's an attorney. He's just he's a fat doughboy. I'm gonna go, and rep on him for the way he looks. But he's like, he made a post online this morning about couldn't understand how the annihilation policy, where Dave's like, look, they're just in there blowing up and killing everybody. You've got to negotiate. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. And our buddy Andy reposted back to him, and he says, you're an attorney. Shouldn't your solutions shouldn't be violence on both sides to where you're just mutually destruction. It should be something along the lines of resolving these conflicts through negotiations and means of contractual agreements. That's the way we work things as rational human beings. And but according to them, you can't do that kind of. Okay, let's keep going.
Surrounding Muslim countries. Was Gaddafi not hostile to Israel?
To Israel, yeah, sure. But he was.
Okay.
I mean, the Europeans and everybody else in NATO found that Gaddafi was a really relatively easy person to get on with latterly.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it was an insane policy.
No, but you'll notice that after he hands over the nuclear program and thus makes himself very vulnerable, unfortunately, for the future of world peace, Libya has been unutterably disastrous for Europe. Hang on.
No, just a clarifying question.
Disastrous for Europe.
I agree with you.
And Somalia and Sudan. Why does America or Israel want to do regime change in Somalia?
Can I just ask you a clarifying question on this? When you say that was a disaster for the prospects of world peace, you mean overthrowing Gaddafi was a disaster?
I say that him being. Sorry, I should have clarified. My thing is, him being overthrown after he's given over the nuclear weapons is a disaster, because it leaves on the table this thing that you have to hold on to nuclear weapons, and if you don't hold on to nuclear weapons, you could be dead.
Do you think maybe the Israelis should stop using the term the Libyan model to push for negotiations with Iran?
No, I don't think anyone should use what happened to Gaddafi as being a good precursor.
We certainly have a lot of agreement there. It was an absolute disaster, particularly to let a guy get sodomized to death after he denuclearized is not a good precedent to set.
I agree, and that's one of the reasons why
Iran wants a nuke so bad.
I'm not sure. It's just to avert being sodomized to death, as you put it. But yeah, they want a nuke because they.
Yeah,
I mean, if you
it's only about
the Iranian
sodomy.
revolutionary government's done since 1979, you'd love what they'll do with the world.
I believe Douglas Murray is a homosexual, is married to a Cohen, which is I think a very Jewish name. So there might be some issues here, right? Let's keep going though.
When they've got a nuke, but anyway, put that aside for a second. I mean, I'm sorry, we slightly come back to where we started, but when you start talking about Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl,
here we go.
It's all awfully noxious smelling. Richard Pearl was a member of the Defense Policy Board, which had an advisory capacity toward the Pentagon in the early 2000s, but it was by no means a policy board that dictated Pentagon policy. Okay.
By the way, Wolfowitz, I don't know about Pearl, but Wolfowitz was the underling to Rumsfeld. Okay, let's keep that in mind.
The last 30 years of American foreign policy, there have been many major actors. Paul Wolfowitz is a relatively major one. But we come slightly back full circle. In my view, I'm not saying you're guilty of this, certainly not knowingly. In my view, when people start talking about Paul Wolfowitz, I always remember that line of Mark Stein's many years ago, and he said, you can't help thinking that one of the reasons why people find Wolfowitz so appealing to talk about is that his name starts with a nasty animal and ends Jewish.
That is a funny thing to say.
People love saying Wolfowitz.
It's such a great name.
It is for
a movie.
Because they he's perfect for it. Perfect for it.
And he looks perfect for it.
Right, you'll say, oh, the crafty Paul Wolfowitz.
His crazy eyebrows.
So you're a bigot. You're a Jew hater if you mention the neocons?
No. Just
there's a realization there from Dave of like, okay, and by the way, Dave is ready for this. He's ready to push back against Douglas Murray for this woke bullshit, which is what he's doing here. Because take a listen. He's not arguing Dave's points here about Gaddafi. He's not arguing them about any of this infiltration into the Middle East from the U.S. perspective and how that one specifically went. He's actually going to push back here about a name and that these two gentlemen are Jewish. Therefore, you don't have to listen to Dave. You don't have to. The pushback is perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, you don't have to even do that because Dave is an anti-Semite or he's carrying water for them. And here you go.
Let me continue with the thought.
Mm-hmm.
So,
stupid.
I remember those days, and his boss, Donald Rumsfeld, was like the ruler of the world.
Okay, his boss, Wolfowitz's boss, Donald Rumsfeld, ruler of the world. We can probably all agree to that, right? Yes.
That time. He had such charisma, such genius was attributed to him for the initial invasion of Iraq. People, you can't imagine the admiration that existed in the defense establishments around the world for Rumsfeld. Dick Cheney was so powerful that people of right and left, particularly on the left, spent all those years in the W. Bush administration saying W wasn't the real president. He was being run by Dick Cheney because he was the brilliant, et cetera, et cetera.
You're certainly listening to him at the beginning.
Okay, but I'm just saying it goes back to this thing of when certain ideas catch hold and what's really going on in them. Now, to attribute American foreign policy in the last 40 years to Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Pearl is knowingly or otherwise to encourage a conspiracy that has very obvious legs. And I just urge you not to do it.
Okay, let me respond to this a little bit. First of all,
I would first say, it doesn't even make sense. Wolfowitz works for Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld is the most powerful person in the world. Wolfowitz then puts out a memo talking about their plans. And if you say that, which is his boss, maybe have projected that to him. And so if you bring that up, you're just anti-Semitic. This is the equivalent to BLM riots happening, and if you don't put a black square on your Instagram, you are a fucking racist, and we don't even need to listen to you. It's the most ridiculous
It is
shit.
not at all saying that these guys, therefore, just control everything. I'm just pointing out what a 4-star general claimed, where plans originated, and that they ended up being implemented. That doesn't mean that they were the absolute ruler or arbiter of what was going to happen. But again, I got to say, for you to say that I can't bring up the neoconservatives...
I never said you couldn't. I
Okay,
just
let
laughed.
me just... Right.
You just laughed. Let's keep going.
But the
by the way,
implication is
Dave is too nice on this one. I was actually expecting Dave to say, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going to say what the fuck I want.
that
And I wish
I'm
you would have.
unwittingly giving fertile ground to some like Jew-hating conspiracy if I bring up a guy who's got a Jewish last name who was a consequential person in our government. This is like identical to the arguments of the woke left. That would just be like, oh, if you even say something, you know, if you bring up the crime rate in Chicago, you're basically a bigot because other people could take this and run with it.
Come on.
No, you come on. What's the
Okay,
argument?
look, if you said to me...
I said a 4-star general said something, and there's no... What's the response?
If you said to me, or somebody said to me, don't you think that some people are running...
Oh my God, those hands. I know he's gay, but this, you've got to stop it.
...the global financial system. And I said, possibly. And I said, who do you think it is? And they said...
This is such a bullshit thing. You are taking something completely different. I can't even watch this. Let's skip forward here a little bit.
If you give the implication that a cabal of people, particularly, and you should be really careful about this because of the people who come up underneath you. If you give the implication that these cabals exist and you decide to elevate the Jews or people with Jewish names in it and then play down the non-Jews, I can tell you, you will
Who's
be
playing
opening
down
up
non-Jews?
a world.
He started with Wesley Clark, a discussion who referenced something else. Who are you playing down, motherfucker? I am so sick of this.
Of madness.
But am I really playing down the non-Jews? I mean, go look at the stuff that I've said about Obama, about George W. Bush.
You said Middle East policy is Dick Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz, and I said,
no. I mean, this is why I'm saying this is a woke leftist tactic. I literally just mentioned that a 4-star general said this. I'm quoting him, and now you're telling me that this is the same thing as promoting.
Don't pretend to me that when you quote somebody, it's a totally arbitrary thing that you just pluck out of the air. You decided
I'm
to
not
pluck
arguing.
that out.
I'm not arguing that it's arbitrary. I'm saying I'm using the quote for a reason. I was connecting it to an argument.
And I'm saying to you...
I'm giving fertile ground to Jew haters to mention it.
I think that when you decide to elevate what is a conspiracy of people who are overthrowing...
Once again, he's never... this is what's crazy about this argument for Douglas Murray, which is Dave is talking about a plan, a project, or whatever, that was discussed, and then it was implemented and carried out. At that point, you're not talking about like, some nefarious plan and a plot, and maybe it's not doing. This is a specific thing carried out by the top levels of the government. God damn you, stupid motherfucker. And this is why, by the way, I think Douglas Murray is a smart guy. But when you're so infected by your bias, you can't have an honest conversation. This is the shit that happens. Okay, we're gonna keep going on here. I'm gonna play multiple. Let's go with here. Let's go. Okay, I don't know what this one is about, but we're gonna play it here.
Consequence of U.S. meddling. I also think that there's people on the other side here, maybe the people who are more neocon leaning, more war hawky leaning. They have a tendency to only focus on the bad things that everybody else does and act like our policies have no impact on this.
Be ridiculous.
So very specifically, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I'll just get two bullet points on this, and we could talk about a lot of this. But look, number one, in 2008, as you well know, right, the Joe Biden's CIA director, who was the CIA director for the entire war up until Donald Trump just came back in, he wrote the Net Means Net memo to Condoleezza Rice, a private cable to the then Secretary of State when he was ambassador to Russia, to let her know that this flirting with bringing Ukraine into NATO is going to end up in a war. And by the way, the Russians don't want to do it. His words exactly. If you keep pushing with this, the Russians are going to have...
Obviously, this is a debate about Ukraine. They got into this one prior to, and I just encourage you to watch this. It's a rough watch.
They are going to have to make a decision that they don't want to make, which is whether they intervene or not. And number two, Stoltenberg, I might be butchering that again, but the head of NATO, he himself said that Vladimir Putin sent him a draft treaty in late 2021 and said, look, if you just put into writing that you will not bring Ukraine into NATO, I won't invade. Now, if you want to argue that...
I admire your appeal to authority to the head of the CIA.
It's not an appeal to authority.
Well,
this was... Okay, so I'm totally out of order here, but... The show starts out about 40 minutes of Douglas Murray doing basically a struggle session with Joe Rogan saying, why didn't you bring on experts from X, Y, and Z? And then at some point he rips on Dave for being a comedian. We'll probably get to some of these clips. You're just a comedian. You're not even an expert. It appeals to the expert class. But then, when Dave's like, look, okay,
How is that an appeal to authority?
You regard the view of the CIA director on that occasion as being useful for your argument. But secondly, hang on a second.
When the CIA is in charge of something and they're making a declaration about something and they're following through with it, that is something to quote someone on, like Donald Trump. I'm going to instigate tariffs, and then he does. It's like, oh, you appeal to authority, are you? That's real interesting. It's like, no, the motherfucker. I'm just talking about the person who has the power to do something about it, and he's doing something about it. That's not an appeal to authority. What a piece of shit.
Okay. Secondly, there's an oddity to believing what Vladimir Putin says.
No, wait, hold on. You didn't let me finish my point.
Okay.
So don't believe what he says. I'm not going to pretend to read his heart and mind or something like that. But at the very least, you handed him the giant excuse in order to do it. I mean, maybe he doesn't really believe it, but this is his argument to his own people and to the world that it's like, look, and we put him in a position, if you hate Vladimir Putin, he's such a terrible guy. Well, we put him in this position where he gets to now very plausibly say to the international community, in the same way that if the Soviet Union had survived and the United States hadn't, and they were...
He doesn't very plausibly have the opportunity to do that. He invaded Ukraine because he wanted to annex the whole country, because he was trying to pretend that the whole place had been run by Nazis.
Okay, whatever. Okay, could be. But let's keep going here. I mean, okay, I might need to come back to these. This is one with Rabbi Shmuel Reichman says, this is the best thing you'll see today. Another masterclass by Douglas Murray. And then it's just Douglas Murray quote, where he's just pontificating out, and nothing's there at all. This one is okay. This here we go. This would be somewhat interesting. Let's play this.
No, there was not starvation in Gaza after 2005. No, there was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times.
There was no deficit?
No, there are
no
plenty.
Goods were cut out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? I've never been to. Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can.
Right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
no,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert,
well, you have to go and touch the ground.
No, I think you have to see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you spend a career talking about something. Yes. I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay.
It's a sort of normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about. Hang on. You're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I think this is a non-argument. I don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument if you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any of this going on.
So you're not...
Okay, by the way, I'm sure you out there can understand that this is just the dumbest argument ever. And I'm going to give you counterpoints to this argument from Douglas Murray. Just wait. Let's finish them.
You have to speak about things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want, as you're proving. But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit, whilst developing all of these views about it. I mean, now I slightly get an idea of where you're coming from. You've read about this blockade, and so you imagine that that's what it is. I imagine you've read all the people who say that Gaza was a...
By the way, so we'll show Douglas Murray having been there, but he's on a promotional tour with the IDF. Is that really the same? Now, someone like Max Blumenthal, as an example, has been to Gaza on his own, not with the IDF, but from the Gazan point of view, okay? That does give some credibility. And Max Blumenthal is very anti what Douglas Murray is saying here. But I don't know that you necessarily, I mean, look, you can't just so what? If Trump hasn't been there, he can't make any policy announcements about this unless he's actually been there. And I would just say Douglas Murray's been there, but on a propaganda tour. So it's almost worse him having been there than someone who hasn't been there but can read this from multiple points of view.
The concentration camp. And you probably think that too. Am I right?
I mean, again, literally a concentration camp. It shares a lot of similarities, I would think.
Wow. Well, as I say, you can't time travel back to the Nazi era.
Let's go back to the blockade.
Go to the Middle East and actually visit it.
Okay, the World Bank said in 1996 for the 1 year of the blockade.
Libertarians are quoting the World Bank. I love it.
It doesn't mean anything. This is a non-argument. Yes, I'm saying the World Bank did their own analysis of this, and they said that it was a 40%
you do your own analysis?
Hold on. You got to stop interrupting and let him finish.
I will.
The World Bank said that 40% drop in the GDP of 1 year due to the blockade, and there's been a blockade from 2007 on. So are you saying that this hasn't had an economic effect? Is that the argument?
No, of course it'll have an economic effect.
So you're saying you have to be on the ground and do an audit of the blockade in order to be able to comment on it?
I think you should at least know what it is, what the territory is, what the situation is in the region. Yes, absolutely.
And the only way to do that is to be there in person.
I think that's the best way. It's not the only way, but it's the best way, for sure. For sure. If you have never seen the countries in question, you've never spoken to the people in question, you've never interviewed anyone, you've never gone around, you've never seen the terrain, and so on, and you've used Wikipedia, I'm sorry, no, that's not the same thing.
Okay, so let's actually talk about that then, which is, what is the lived experience of someone who, for instance, has I want to put this here, for whatever reason. Now, you guys are looking at this and you're just saying, wait a second, this is Lex Fridman. Yeah, Lex interviewed Douglas Murray about lived experience, and it went over this exact issue. So let's do a quick thing.
As you, Douglas Murray, and you, Lex Fridman, don't have the right to talk about race and racism in America. It is our struggle. You are from a privileged class of people that don't know what it's like to be a black man or woman in America walking down the street. Can you steel man that case?
First of all, fuck that.
Okay, that's not. I think we need to define steel manning.
Okay.
Can you?
I know what steel
try
manning is. Okay. I really resent that form of argumentation.
Sure.
I really resent it. I have the right to talk about whatever the hell I want. And no one's going to stop me or try to intimidate me.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or tell me that I can't simply because of my skin color.
Gotcha.
And I think that if I said to somebody else the other way around, it would be equally reprehensible. If I said, shut up, you have no right to criticize anything that Douglas Murray says because you've not got my skin color. Okay. It's not an exact comparison, but seriously, is that a reasonable form of argument? You haven't been through everything I've been through in my life, therefore you can't comment. No. In that case, nobody can talk about anything. We might as well pack up, go home, and isolate ourselves.
Strong words, but can you try to steel man the case?
Absolutely.
Not in this particular situation, but there's people that have lived through something that can comment in a very specific way. Like, for example, Holocaust survivors.
Yes.
There is a sense in which, maybe a basic sense of civility, when a Holocaust survivor is speaking about their experience of the Holocaust, than an intellectual from a very different part of the world that's simply writing about nuanced geopolitics of World War II just should not interrupt the Holocaust survivor.
We physically interrupt them if they're telling their
with
story.
words, with logic and reason, that the experience of the Holocaust survivor somehow fundamentally has a deeper understanding of the humanity and the injustice of
Well, first of all, again, we're in even deeper waters now, but in terms of wanting to listen to another person who has experienced something, yes, but not endlessly. Not endlessly. I mean, there are some people who've written about there are people who've written about the Holocaust who didn't experience the Holocaust and have written about it better than people who did.
Interesting.
It's not this idea that the lived experience, to use this terrible modern jargon, as if there's another type. This idea that the lived experience has to triumph over everything else is not always correct. It can be correct in some circumstances. If you are sitting in a room with a Holocaust survivor and somebody who'd never heard about the Holocaust and wanted to kind of, shoot out their views on it, yeah, one of those people should be heard more than the other, obviously. If there's somebody who's experienced racism firsthand and there's somebody else who has never experienced it, then obviously you'd want to hear from the person who.
Okay, I think you get the idea here, right? And by the way,
discussion.
let me go back there. Our boy says, Turbo, why is your mic volume lower than the video? I'm sorry. I'm trying to work on this, okay? It should be good. We're still working on this. Okay, so back when Douglas Murray wanted to talk about Holocaust revision or whatever, he wanted to be able to talk about it because he should be able to do it, and lived experience doesn't have anything to do with it. Except for now, he's completely the opposite, and he's ripping on you if you haven't been to the cross points in Gaza. Now, here is a nice little video, an explanation. Douglas Murray has received an award from Israeli Isaac Herzog for services rendered during the Gaza genocide. It's an extraordinary privilege for me to align with the state of Israel, gushed Israeli asset Douglas Murray at the president's residence. Yeah, that should be noted there, right? Getting a little, that should be noted. There's something to be discussed. Okay, let's go back here. See if we can have any. Oh, and this is another one. So he's doing videos he's done there from the Gaza place, but he's doing them with the IDF. So that should be noted there as well. Okay, so there you go. Let's keep going here. I've got a few other clips. Let's see. This one, that's like 6 minutes. I want to do a shorter version. Here you go. Here, hang on. Here, let's go here. Let's see if this is worthwhile.
Let him finish the sentence.
So the tragedy that's been inflicted on Gaza is orders of magnitudes greater than October 7th. Even if you had the right, let's say, somebody broke onto your property and killed some of your family members and you want to go kill this guy. If he goes back to his apartment building and you know that there's women and children in that apartment building, and so your move is to blow up the building, what you would be charged with is murder in the first degree. Cold-blooded, premeditated, intentional murder. And you could sit there and tell the judge, I didn't want to kill all those people. Why would I want to kill all of those people? I just had to kill that one guy. But that's not what counts. You did it intentionally. You dropped a bomb knowing that there were women and children in that building. That is intentionally murdering innocent people. And if you're going to advocate for this war, so why can't you just say, yes, that price is acceptable? Because then we could have a real conversation about why the other side is going to look at you like a monster.
Okay, I'm totally with Dave on this. And by the way, people have reached back and said, look, during the war, it's a different situation. Once again, this is Israel. In my interpretation, this is Israel against their own citizens. These are not people. By the way, I've done a little bit of a breakdown. I haven't done a show on it yet, but how do you become a citizen of Israel? Glenn Beck talked about how he sent an open letter to Israel. He wanted to be a citizen. I'm like, it's not going to happen because you either have to get confirmed by your rabbi, you have to convert, you have to be you have to be a Jew to have this if you want to actually just immigrate to Israel. Now, if you're born there, you can be an Israeli, you can be a citizen. Even if you're Muslim, you can't be a part of the Knesset in the government. You can't be a part of the Supreme Court or any of the other courts unless you say that, and you take an oath that Israel is to be a Jewish nation. Okay, so there's some sort of apartheid situation that you have to take in some sort of pathetic oath in this case. Okay, so anyway, there's kind of on there. Okay, let's keep going here because I do have other videos I want to play here. Maybe I'll pull that off. So we have. What else do we have? Dave Smith and that one. This one. This one is by Sal the Agorist. He clipped this one. I mean, everybody's clipping stuff. Let's keep going here. It's
exactly get your point. Like, there was lots of pushback. If you're saying he should go and debate somebody who's giving him pushback on that, okay, maybe. I also think it's reasonable for him to say, I don't really do debates.
Yeah, I think it's weird to mainstream very fringe views constantly and not...
I will say this. I'm sorry, I'm all over the board on this. I just bookmarked a bunch of these and we're going to go walk through them. But the show started with Douglas Murray ripping on Rogan for not having like more anti-Zionist people. And Dave listed like 3 or 4 people immediately that were pro-Zionist. Okay? Did I say anti-Zionist? Pro-Zionist. But then Douglas Murray decides to go ripping on Ian Carroll. And then he also decides to rip on, what's his name? Daryl Cooper. Now, I've done a breakdown. I've listened to Daryl Cooper's show, his Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem, at least twice, maybe even some additional time. It's fascinating to me. There's nothing anti-Semitic about this. This is very down the middle. It understands the Muslim side or the Palestinian side. It understands the Israel side, and it walks through this. It doesn't do Holocaust denial stuff, all this stuff that these people make up. Douglas Murray wants to make comments about it without ever, and I ripped on him originally when he was like on PDB, Patrick Bet David, and he's like, I've never listened to it, but he's obviously, and I'm like, okay, you're such a piece of shit. You are such an authority on everything, but you don't do you don't do the research into even understanding what this person is, because it doesn't matter to you, because it's easier to call names so you don't have to realize
Give another side. I think that's weird.
Well, I mean, okay, I think there's a little bit of a contradiction here. You're saying now that these are fringe views, but then you're also saying that these are enormously powerful
No.
views.
There's no contradiction. Let me clear it up if you think there is. I think there are very fringe views that have become mainstreamed on the right.
But then aren't they not fringe by definition?
Sure, you can play an epistemological game.
I'm just saying let's be accurate.
But you do understand the concept, don't you?
That fringe ideas become mainstreamed?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Sure.
So that's it.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure. So you're saying that exactly get your point. Like,
okay, well, let's keep going here.
One of the things that is going on at the moment is, despite, or maybe because of what you just described, there are movements now on the right in America, subcultures, including people who follow both of you, who are very interested in playing with this absolute beyond the pale thing. Why somebody like Jake Shields wants to play around with Holocaust denial? Why?
I can't answer for Jake Shields. I don't.
And why is Holocaust denial? I'm doing I've done a Leo Frank series, okay, with Pete Quinones, and I'm breaking down now. I'm going to have one coming up here, but every time I'm going to do it, something like this comes up and I have to talk about this. But I'm doing a little bit of a conspiracy theory with the Leo Frank situation. If you don't know about it, just go check out my playlist on that and we'll talk about that. But it's, what was I going to say? I've now lost my train of thought.
Why do you think?
Idea. I have no idea. I think
I'm telling
a lot of people get captured by audience capture.
Captured by their audience.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You get a lot of positive reinforcement from a bunch of twisted people.
Well, it's also, I mean, there's something about, Michael Malice had that great line. He goes, when you take the red pill, you're supposed to take one and not swallow the whole bottle. Yes. And I think there's like this dynamic. What happens is, and of course, people know the red pill is the analogy from the Matrix. The idea that you wake up to realizing that so much of the stuff you believed was bullshit propaganda and is all lies. And this is a real danger when the establishment and the institutions are all caught with their pants down, having sold a bunch of very consequential policies based on lies. And then once people realize that, they go, well, what else have they been lying to me about?
Right.
And then they almost...
By the way, I mentioned that over and over with the COVID stuff, and it bleeds into everything else, and your conspiracy theories about whatever, you name it. When you deny it or you don't allow conversation, then it's exactly what Dave's talking about here, which is you start to go, well, what else is there? And then if you're not allowing this conversation to happen, you're not allowing doctors to come out and talk about the COVID shit, then it's just it opens up the floodgates for this kind of stuff. So it's ridiculous.
Look into every single thing and go, yeah, I think the whole thing was lies. Now I agree with you. There's danger in that, and I think that there are some things that
I don't know about danger. That's
then people
a bit strong.
jump to conclusions that are totally wrong. But
fine.
I guess I tend to look at that and go, well, then maybe the people with power, not random podcasters, but like the people with real power, should do a better job of not lying through their fucking teeth about everything.
Well, maybe you have power. Maybe you have power, both of you. We live in an era where podcasters have a lot of power. If you go on a podcast with Jake Shields, and Jake Shields goes on to another podcast and says he doesn't think 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, what do you think's happening there? That's an exercise of power.
And by the it's so crazy because if it's not exactly 6 million, they lose their shit. Maybe that's my comment about the Leo Frank stuff, which is unbelievable gaslighting about victimhood, about all kinds of stuff. Okay, let's keep going on here.
Was so powerful that people of right and left.
And by the way, Andrew Jacob said 1 for Dave, 0 for okay, I get that. Turbo Gang says, Grug1 says, why hasn't Scott Horton been on Jerry? I don't know. I know Dave's promoted him. That would be good. Scott Horton has been on Piers Morgan a bunch. I just saw some of these. By the way, I had a whole thing. There's this guy, Marcel. He's a black guy. He's a libertarian. And he had a Spaces last week about Dave Smith, part of the problem. And I wish he had recorded it because I missed some of it. But it was the most dumb, ridiculous thing ever. And I'm like, if you think I'm just a Dave Smith stan, just remember that Robbie the Fire, I had questioned them about why are you guys still all lovey-dovey with Patrick McDavid? He's a complete piece of shit. He hired this Cuomo guy, and Robbie told me to go fuck myself, okay? So that was on their show. He told me, Tyler, to go fuck myself because I dared question the undying loyalty to a complete loser, Patrick McDavid. Fine, okay? I get it. But with that said, Dave Smith does very good debating, okay? I'm an attorney. I'm a little drunk right now, but I think if I wasn't, I still would have the ability to do some of these debates. I do that all the time. When you know your situation, you know your facts, I can do fairly good at this kind of stuff, okay? Would I go and do a debate with Douglas Murray on this thing? No, because that's not my area of expertise. But Dave does very well. And when I'm listening to him and I hear him in his arguments, I'm always thinking ahead. It's like, what would I say? And I'm thinking about that. And then he pulls it out of his hat and he says some things. And I think, you know what? Dave does a great job. Now, this Marcel guy, he has a Spaces, and he's like, Dave, and he's a black dude. Just gonna throw that out there because I think that's important. And he's like, Dave shouldn't be doing this because he's taken away time that someone else could do this debate and do a much better job. And then he starts reading off the list of people from like the Libertarian Institute. It's like, hey, shut up, dogs. And it's like, okay, perhaps Scott Horton, maybe some of these others. I don't know, but debating is a talent and it's a skill. Hey, can you shut the fuck up? There's a black dog back here making noise. It's a skill. And so they're and by the way, they're like, oh, Dave Smith is sucking off the tit of, Trump. And I'm like, have you listened to his shows lately? He's kind of like knocking on. And then Andy chimes in and says, yeah, but Hans Hermann Hoppe also said that, Trump was like the better choice than Kamala. And they're like, well, that's fine for him. But anyway, so they've got Dave Smith derangement syndrome, right? It's just complete bullshit. Anyway, I don't know what that has to do with anything other than let's keep going here.
Particularly on the left, spent all those years in the W. Bush administration saying W wasn't the real president. He was being run by Dick Cheney because he was the brilliant, etc., etc.
You're certainly listening to him at the beginning.
Okay, but I'm just saying it goes back to this thing of when certain ideas catch hold and what's really going on in them. Now, to attribute American foreign policy in the last 40 years to Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Pearl is knowingly or otherwise to encourage a conspiracy that has very obvious legs. And I just urge you not to do it.
Okay.
Okay, we're just going to keep going from there. Let's see if there's any. Oh, this was a bookmark I had about. This is a teacher that fucks some kids and she's decently hot, and then she blamed her husband on it. Okay, let's keep going.
Suffering that's being inflicted on the people of Gaza right now cannot be overstated. And so, to lecture them about how you're supposed to handle that exactly. But I will say, man, I think there's kind of this selective empathy that you have here. Like, I agree with you, talk about these teenagers being slaughtered at a music festival on October 7th. It's like, my God, like, I have little kids. I can't, imagine the nightmare of this happening to somebody's children. But at the same time, we're not having this conversation on October 9th or in November or December of 2023. We're having it in 2025, where the tragedy that's been inflicted on Gaza is orders of magnitudes greater than October 7th. There are just every day people are inundated with images of just dead women and children. This is like one of the most brutal wars. And by several metrics that really, personally matter to me, like the number of dead kids, that's a pretty good one. It's more children have died than in any recent war. I mean, this is like, I do think there's almost, like a fundamental framing bias that you get into when people have these debates, and I've had several of them, as you have also. But it seems to me that there's almost an implicit difference in the value that you place on Israeli life versus the value that we place on Palestinians' life. And to even, we've gone this far into the conversation and haven't even talked about the fact that, dude, Israel has... Feel however you feel. If you want to argue, I haven't been there. Stuff does get through the blockade. Okay, fine. This is a captive people, that Israel has dominated since at least 1967. Many of them are there because of the creation of the state of Israel, who used to live in what is now called Israel. And they are just, the amount of human suffering that's being inflicted on them, when, even as you kind of acknowledged with the George W. Bush exporting democracy, Hamas in many ways was forced on these people. In fact, we saw protests against Hamas just recently. So I don't know. That to me seems to be the greatest human tragedy. And I think much more so than you can characterize it as people being pro-Hamas or people being anti-Semitic. But I actually think that the mass movement around the world of people who oppose this war has been that people feel really awful about all these babies and who are being slaughtered.
Okay, quite a few things. First of all, let's just get one term correct, because you said you do think it's a concentration camp.
I said it shares many,
Right. And you also say that there's a disproportionately heavy youth population in Gaza.
Yes. Do you think that's not accurate?
I think the second one is accurate.
Right.
But it's a very strange thing to say that there's a population boom in a concentration camp. In Auschwitz in the 1940s, there was not a doubling of the population.
Yeah, I didn't say it was.
He didn't say it was a
death
concentration camp. He said it shares many of the characteristics.
Auschwitz was a concentration camp.
It was ultimately a death camp, no?
Yes, it started as a concentration
camp. Yes, correct.
What's the point?
You'll notice that people were not...
It's like, I'm going to pinpoint a small thing you said, and then I'm going to push back against it to make it like everything is gone. I get it when you're like, oh, look, when you lie about one thing, then you can't believe anything else. But this is what we're working on.
Doubling in size their number because of the children they could have in Auschwitz.
Yeah, but nobody's calling it a concentration camp because it's the same as Auschwitz.
Okay,
I don't
but
know.
let's just at least tidy up the language a bit. Either you think the place is a concentration camp, or you think it's not a concentration camp, and I don't think it can be a concentration camp, or any such term is suitable when you're talking about a place which you yourself have admitted has a disproportionately young population. So that's the first thing.
I don't think...
What does that young population have to do with a concentration camp? You can't have a concert... Like, Epstein had an island of kids.
Breeding in any way argues against... But okay, I didn't call it a concentration camp.
You said it has many of the same...
But you asked him if it did. You asked him if it had any of the characteristics of a concentration
Yes,
camp.
because he said earlier that it did.
Okay, well, all
Long
I'm saying.
before
Okay,
that-
so let me
that
be
speaks
much
there, long
more
before
precise.
that.
Let me be much more precise. Okay, so I'm not claiming that it is a concentration camp or that it is akin to Auschwitz. I'm saying that it's been under full blockade since 2007. Israel rules the seas, the airs. They control electricity that goes in. They're not allowed to have an airport. They're not allowed to have a seaport. They don't have the freedom to leave without permission from the Israeli government. They don't have the freedom to trade with the world. They don't have a freedom to vote over the government that rules them. I don't know. Call it whatever you want to. That's the situation.
And by the way, Douglas Murray, I know it says watch again and it's taken off the screen there, but Douglas Murray does not push back on those claims. Let's see if I can find a better one. Let's hang on. Okay, let's go here. Let's see what this one says.
Say, aha. He's perfect for it. Perfect for it.
And he looked perfect for it.
Right. He did the Jewish meme. Okay, gotcha.
There is no deficit? No, there are no plenty goods were kept out. There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points? No.
Okay, we already played that one. Let's see if there's any other good ones here.
You say, I'm not a historian, but I'm going to spend my time talking about history. I'm not a journalist, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. It's a weird move, yeah?
No.
You don't think?
No, I'm a free American. I can talk about what I like to.
So I don't.
So what is the point
I've
here?
noticed you can, but
but
we
what's
all
the
can.
point?
The point is, what are you pushing? What are you watering?
What am
Why?
I pushing?
Yes.
Liberty, free markets, peace, prosperity, not getting in another stupid catastrophic war, which we're on the precipice of right now. That's what I'm pushing.
What are we on the precipice of?
Well, I think weren't you just talking about it the other day? Everyone I hear on the inside says we're about to attack Iran. I think.
By the way, that's a good exchange there, and it goes on. Oh, let's keep going here.
You're not raising questions.
And by the way, I have a lot of these bookmarked from this like ridiculous people that think Douglas Murray like just destroyed Dave, and I don't know that there's any winning. Dave actually on his own show said, I don't know that I won so much as Douglas Murray just lost. Right, and I started the show by talking about my friend who, more of a right winger, and he's got some issues with Israel as well. But we haven't really talked a ton about this. And he's just saying Douglas Murray's an asshole. He's like, he made some good points, but he's a complete douchebag. And I'm like, yes, it's tough to get past being a complete douchebag.
You throw a lot of shit out there. There's some point at which I'm just raising questions is not a valid thing.
It's always valid.
You're not raising questions. You're not asking questions. You're telling people something.
Do you think Daryl's doing that?
I think there's a whole bunch of guys doing that.
I think
Dave is doing that, very obviously. Dave's a comedian, but he's now mainly talking about Israel.
No, I don't know if I'm mainly talking about Israel.
That's
but
all I see you
have
on the
opinions.
internet doing.
Yeah, but that's you.
Well, that might be what you've seen.
It's
but
just
I don't
you
think that's.
consuming clips.
But that is also your shtick now, isn't it?
Well, what do you mean by that's my shtick?
Well, you're not a geopolitics guy in general, are you?
I don't even know exactly what you're asking.
I'm saying you've decided, being a comedian, you've decided now to become somebody who talks about Israel.
Okay, let's go. Let's have me keep walking
to
through
use Gaza as a stockpiling place for rockets to fire into Israel. All of it would be different. If they had just resisted the temptation that so many of us do in our lives to stop keeping RPGs in our cellars and then Katyusha rockets in our children's bedrooms, all of it could have been different. If that desire to live in peace beside your neighbors had superseded the desire to stockpile rockets, it would all be different.
Yeah, or if
And
Israel
what
just
you
hadn't
describe
occupied
as-
them for 60 years, it would all be different too.
They
I mean,
weren't
why is it the onus
occupying-
always
they
on
weren't
them?
Well, you believe in self-determination, I'm sure. Yes.
I believe in individual rights. Yeah, sure.
Okay, individual rights. And that includes the right to make bad decisions.
Sure.
Yes. The Palestinians in Gaza, when they voted in Hamas, made a very bad decision.
Yeah, of course,
and
Douglas.
In the
but
years,
but,
hang on.
Yes.
Hang on. And in the years after that, they made bad decision after bad decision.
And look, Dave breaks this down, which is it was not a plurality that voted them in. It's like the minority that got them, and they had anyway, whatever. It's just interesting here. Is that a justification for destroying Gaza? I am not a fan of Hamas. Hamas are bad. I understand it, but I'm also not a fan of the IDF. And I'm going to go to my own tweet here, which I did shortly. Let's see if I can find it here. Because I think this is kind of an important thing to remember, a clip that, here we go. No, that's me live right now. Okay, is this it? No. There we go. This is part of their exchange on the debate. And let's go here. Take it away.
Is that price acceptable? And she said, yes, we believe that price is acceptable. You're saying if you're going to support this war, you know this is the price of it. So why can't you just say, yes, that price is acceptable? Because then we could have a real conversation about why the other side is going to look at you like a monster.
Because, first of all, I don't agree with any of the characterization you make. Any of it.
Okay.
You say that the Israelis get some information as if this is like what? They're making it up? Or you think the Israelis want to drop a bomb? Or no, they act... They act on information about where the terrorists are, just like they act on information of where the hostages are.
Is that price acceptable?
Okay, so what's important there is Douglas Murray then goes on, basically his issue with that is, like we've heard over and over, the IDF and the righteous war that the Israelis are doing. They don't make mistakes. They're the most holy moral bombing ever, right? But then we have this issue, which is just recently, and I'm going to read here. This video was discovered on a cell phone of a paramedic who was found along with 14 other Palestinians rescued and medical workers in a mass grave in Gaza. The Red Cross and Red Crescent societies presented it to the UN Security Council this week. And then hang on. Their investigation on April 1, Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar said several uncoordinated vehicles were identified and suspiciously towards IDF troops without headlights or emergency. The IDF then opened fire on suspected vehicles. Okay, so it all sounded fine until you actually see here's the video of in question. Okay, lights on in front. This truck passes, lights on in front of that one too. Nothing suspicious. They didn't know this guy was filming. Another car comes past, lights on there as well, indicating, hey, we're emergency vehicles. We're trying to help people out. Just forward up. Okay, there's a car on the side of the road. They're like, oh, someone needs help. Let's go over there. So we're gonna go over there. 1, 2, 3, and they get out to say, hey, this guy might need help. Hey, let's go over there and help this person out. Okay. This goes on for another 5 minutes. Basically just a slaughter of people. It's crazy. Douglas Murray is like, hey, these people, they do not make mistakes. They are ethical. You're talking about them making mistakes and they don't. Yes. Not only do they make mistakes, they then lie about it. Okay. I don't even look at that. Looking dapper, says Jose. I got a new shirt. I put it on. There we go. I thought we won a war so we don't have to subject ourselves to shit like this. You're talking about the show. This is an amazing train wreck. I was enthralled. Yes, that is actually it. And I will say this, say what you want about Douglas Murray and his accent, and he's smart. There's nothing that you can say on the other side that Dave Smith couldn't handle. There was nothing he was stumped by, okay? And I'm not going to take this shit here that somehow, if you're not visiting the location, you can't make comments about it like Douglas Murray was said. We just played a clip here, Douglas Murray in full, let's go here. With him on Lex Fridman, basically saying, nah, bullshit. You don't have to. Lived experience, fuck you. I'm going to talk about these things. Matter of fact, some people can write about the Holocaust. The Holocaust. They can write about the Holocaust and have better perspective than people that were involved with it. That's literally what he said. Okay, so there was nothing in this debate that Dave Smith couldn't handle, and I think that he did just well. It's easier to shoot these civilians with the flashing emergency lights versus shooting mosques coming at you in the sky. Good point. I haven't seen you in forever, Jose, says Meredith. Hello, how you doing? One in the late 1700s, says Magoo. I appreciate you guys all coming in here tonight. I think I'm about done because I have to take a piss. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about with I mean, there's just so many clips. I would say just go watch this thing. You're going to be just fine on it. Douglas Murray, once again, this is somewhat interesting. I don't know why I would even entertain this, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is Douglas Murray claiming that Qatar, who is influencing DC, yes, the infamous DC lobby binder, and it's, Israelis. But what's interesting there, and I've talked about this, is Pam Bondi, our AG, was a foreign registered agent, a foreign agent registered under the FARA Act for Qatar. Okay, she did dirty work for Qatar. I don't understand the whole big deal about Qatar, and I know there's a kind of a it's kind of a funny joke. Is it Qatar? But she was literally a Qatari agent. So these losers coming out us after us at this point, it just doesn't work for us. Is there anything else I missed here? Douglas Murray, this chicken tits. Douglas Murray. I'm an American. I talk like I want. Okay, Douglas. Okay, that one we played as well. Okay, maybe this is the one, because there was some shit here about experts. So we should probably talk a little bit about that.
Like you're saying, I claim to be an expert, but then I have like a parachute to get out of it by being like, hey, I'm just a comedian who's just saying this. Yeah. But I don't think I've ever like really claimed to be an expert. I have opinions on things.
I know, but
because I'm interested in these topics.
Yeah, I know, but isn't it weird to go around? For instance, let's get to the last year and a half. It's a bit weird to be simultaneously saying, I'm not an expert on a conflict, and talking about it everywhere.
I don't think so. Not really. Huh. I mean, I don't know. I don't think like I don't see how you
do
can
you
have
talk
an
about these things?
Which things?
All these things that we're talking about.
Some of them, yeah.
Are you an expert?
I am on some, yes.
On some,
but you talk about some that you're not an expert on.
You'll notice that I didn't just.
What should you do if those subjects get breached?
Well, I think that you educate yourself as much as you can.
Shouldn't you say I'm not an expert and then give your opinion if you're in the middle of a conversation?
I think it's, as I say, I think that it's a weird move to say, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to talk about it nonstop. I think that is strange.
Okay, I don't agree. And by the way, that says a lot about your audience, right? You guys are in the chat here, and you can take a listen to me. Do I know? I mean, I'm going to say, by the way, Dave's saying I'm not an expert in this, but give me a fucking break. I think when he's able to break this down, once again, I'm going to emphasize this. There's not one issue that Douglas Murray brought up that Dave Smith didn't also know about and then add to it. Okay, there was not a subject that David was like, oh, I don't even know about that. It was like obscure little references to this and this and this. They're going back and forth. Both of these guys know a lot more about this situation than me, and that is what And so you try to appeal to authority and saying you're not an expert on this, and it's like, motherfucker, I'm gonna listen to you. And Dave actually pushes back at one point, and I don't know that I have the clip here. Let's try this one.
It's going to be fascinating to see your perspectives on these things. So that's why you're here together.
Okay.
And
Well,
Douglas,
can I ask you something?
Yes, sir.
Since the war in Israel began, and since the war in Ukraine began, you've had quite a lot of people who are very against both in different ways.
Yes.
Do you think you've had enough people on who are supportive of either war?
I don't know that word enough, if that's a good word.
Let's say enough people who are on the side of Israel instead of wild critics of Israel.
Well, I've had a few. I mean, I believe God Sad is on the side of Israel.
For sure.
Jordan is on the side of Israel.
You had Mike Baker, Coleman Hughes.
Yeah.
Coleman did it for like 20 minutes. That wasn't why he was here.
No. I mean, none of them. And none of them is why they're here.
Which is interesting. That's not why they were there yet. Douglas Murray then rips on him for having Ian Carroll, who talked about some of these things, but Rogan says, well, that's not why he's here. So it goes both ways.
It's a good question.
Do you think you've tilted one way?
Me personally?
No, just with the guests you've had.
The guests, yeah, probably more tilted towards the idea that perhaps the way they've done it is barbaric.
Mm-hmm. But why do you think that is? Just out of interest. I'm just interested in your selection of guests because you're like the world's number one podcast. So
yeah, it's not. I don't think about it that way. I just think I'd like to talk to this person.
But can I just?
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
it's your
sure,
show, but
sure,
I mean,
sure.
If you're going to interview historians of the conflict or historians in general,
Mhm.
why would you get somebody like Ian Carroll? Or
Yeah, but Ian Carroll, I didn't bring him on for that purpose. I brought him on
what I
because I
just
want to
said.
find out, like, how does one get involved in the whole conspiracy theory business? Because
But Coleman Hughes he wasn't here for that. You just talked about it for 20 minutes. And it wasn't, and Coleman Hughes, by the way, shat the bed on that situation.
his whole thing is just conspiracies.
Sure.
You know?
But do you have any? I mean, there's been a tilt in the conversation, in both conversations, in the last couple of years, and it's largely to do with people who have appointed themselves experts, who are not experts.
You mean like Ian? I don't think he appoints himself an expert in anything.
Who's that other dude who thinks he's an expert on Churchill?
Oh, Daryl Cooper does not think he's an expert.
In fact, I think it's everybody else is always calling him an expert, and he's like, I'm just a history
Have
nerd.
you ever absorbed any of his material? Have you ever consumed any of his podcasts or anything like that?
I tried.
Yeah?
No, you haven't.
It's pretty hard
No.
to listen to somebody who says, I don't know what I'm talking about, but now I'm going to talk. Or
There's no way he listened to Daryl Cooper and then makes that comment. You didn't do it. By the way, Daryl's very entertaining to me.
I don't know about this, or I'm not capable of debating this historian, but I'm going to just tell you what I think.
Yeah, but that's not
I think that's a
exactly
little
that's
bit
not
out of
exactly what
context.
Daryl was saying. I mean, Daryl's point of view, however you feel about this, what Daryl's saying is he doesn't really like doing debates. He likes to do long format stuff where he can really explain
But
his position.
if you throw a lot of shit out there, there's some point at which I'm just raising questions is not a valid thing.
Okay, I think I'm done with all this. Raising questions is always a valid thing. Okay, so Meredith and Jose seems to be hooking up in the chat. There you go. Been hustling, going to Vegas. Yeah, yes. By the way, everyone should go support Jose. He does his morning dump. We love that. Go check that out. Jose's done great work. He is going on Jake Shields. We'll see how that goes. I'm a little worried. And I've told Jose, I'm like, look, Jake Shields, and he was brought up in the Joe Rogan thing. He's not a super smart guy, okay? He's got some, he's probably has CTE, okay? Let's be honest here. His show is rough to watch. He's not super smart. If he brings on a guest and the guest is good, it'll actually help. So Dave Smith on there wasn't bad. There's a few others afterwards. I'm just like, I'm not that interested. But I think Jose and Austin going on there would be great. So more Dickless Murray, according to Magoo. Okay. Jose says, recording one OKC, which should drop the other. Okay. And another one for the next month in child trafficking networks and how they're connected. I love the stuff Jose does. Northern Side says, does Murray have a successful podcast or should he shut the fuck up? I mean, what's interesting, let's I'm going to go here because there was a comment. I mean, I have so many links in here. What does Shapiro say? Nothing there. There was let's see if I could find it here. It was Liberty Lockdown, Clint. This is actually kind of fascinating. Let's see if I can find this tweet here. It's with Douglas Murray because he put out a book called, I mean, once again, him, James Lindsay, you should be going and checking out these people. When they're talking about a bunch of stuff, you should actually go look and see what they're actually putting out for their books because it's fascinating. And I'm almost there. I'm still cruising down. I'm gonna be able to find it. Hopefully keep going. Kash Patel. I mean, there's so many losers in this world. I'm not a big fan of a Kash Patel and Bongino, trust the plan type of thing. Look at us. We're going to turn this place into a museum on day one, except for when we get in, we're going to suck the tit off of all these people. Okay, where is it at? Oh, there we go. Okay, so, well, that's not the one I wanted. It's not as good. Where is Clint? Come on, I'm trying to find Clint's post, and I got a bunch of cycling shit. Maybe I'll do this. There we go. Okay, so James Lindsay puts out there, and he's like, why are they calling this guy a neocon? And then Clint actually tweets out, because he actually literally wrote the book on it. He wrote a book called Neoconservatism, Why We Need It. And if you watch the actual debate there with Dave Smith, when Dave brings up neoconservatism, Murray actually says, oh, you're using the N-word now? And Dave's like, what? What are you talking? Oh, neoconservatism? That's the N-word? Because Douglas Murray, and he doesn't really jump on this, but Dave talks about the ills of the Iraq war and selling us down to the primrose path on that. And Douglas Murray doesn't really jump in, but he was all for those. He's for every single war you can imagine. So he's quite a piece of shit. He acts like the guy who's been punched a lot. Can't figure it because he's gay. Douglas Murray wrote a book about how great there you go. I just showed you that. If one side is absolutely correct, just asking questions shouldn't matter. It's like a prosecutor getting mad at the defense for raising questions. Counselor, if you had a good case, what harm is there? Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of thing that you think about, libertarian circles, which is, look, Lindsey Graham used to say this, look, if you don't have anything to hide, why should you be worried about, us obliterating the Fourth Amendment and just come and look at your stuff? Man, come on, nigga. Was that necessary that I used the N-word on that? I mean, come on, that's just ridiculous. You don't have to be out there. So yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit. Okay, we're done. We're done. I hope Jim Lindsay tried to claim, he wrote that in 2006, so it doesn't. Jay, look, I hope you guys, look, I appreciate you guys all being here. And if you are here and you haven't hit the like button, or if you haven't subscribed, shame on you. If you want to throw a few shekels out the way, that's perfectly fine. We will be back next week. Sorry I missed last week. Appreciate you everyone being here. This is Corona Extra. I have beers left over from the beach because we were at the beach this last week. I'm gonna go down and get something to eat right now. I hope everyone enjoyed this show. Thank you for everybody for coming in, and if there, I would encourage you to go watch the Dave Smith, what's your name, Douglas Murray debate thing. Look, there's people out there that pretend to be smart, and you don't have to have gone to school people in these whole debates and whatnot. And I think Dave Smith did just fine. I'm a big Dave Smith fan, but with that, still I criticize, as you should. So everybody, until next week. I missed this one, says Minder. You came in a little late. Thanks for another great show, says Red Ensign. Yeah, appreciate everybody coming in. See you next week. Out.
Okay, I'm leaving now, by the way.
But she's back.
And now.
Tyler, if you had any clout about you, if you had any knowledge of the real world of what happens, we walk into Tim Katz's studio, immediately there's 4 Jewish lawyers.
King of the Druids!
That's all we needed. A Jewish princess.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't expect the normies like Tyler to understand these kind of things. He's just a podunk lawyer somewhere in rural California. He's an idiot, really.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
This guy's, I wouldn't say he's full of shit, but I'd say he's stupid. Whatever, if you're in the comments, if you're in the chat now, I wouldn't pay attention to anything he says anyway. But
more or less, eat shit and die.
Don't ever come to the top left. He will end you. Do you see what he just did to Tyler? Just fucking challenge this.
Yeah, Tyler's done.
Top is a maniac.
He can't even reply right now because he's crippled.
He's got nothing to say. What are you talking about? I didn't say that. Why don't you argue with something I said, you dumb bastard?